Hello, everyone. I am claudiumurgan, the host of the Spiritual Inspire Show, and my guest today is Rey Hernandez. Rey is the Executive Director of the Consciousness and Contact Research Institute, an academic research institute comprised of 15 PhD academics and medical doctors, whose mission is to explore the relationship between consciousness, cosmology, and contact with non-human intelligence via contact modalities. Rey graduated with honors from Rutgers College, was a master candidate at Cornell University, and was a PhD candidate at the University of California at Berkeley, where he was a recipient of a National Science Foundation. He is also one of the co-authors of the book Beyond UFOs, The Science of Consciousness and Contact with Non-Human Intelligence. Rey, thank you very much for joining me today.
You're very welcome. Thank you for the invitation.
I listened to some of your previous interviews, and I really don't want you to repeat some of the stories, but just as a summary for my viewers, everything started for you pretty much in March 2012 when we were still an atheist, and you witnessed how your wife, while in your living room, disappeared in thin air. At least this is your impression at that time. So also in parallel, you're going through your own paranormal experience. That event made you look deeper into such phenomena. So let's take it from there, please.
Yes, before that date, March of 2012, I was totally clueless about the topic of the paranormal, UFOs, near-death experiences, out-of-body experiences, etc. I then had an experience with my wife in our living room with an energy being that appeared in our living room after my wife was praying all night. And that being basically medically healed our dog that was totally paralyzed, that we were going to be euthanizing later that afternoon with our veterinarian. And so that being put me to sleep. My wife disappeared in front of me with the dog, and then when I woke up, the dog was running around in the entire living room. And then shortly thereafterwards, my wife began to pray at night because she thought it was her angels that responded to her prayers. And then these huge UFOs would appear to my wife. And so then 6 months after the initial encounter in the living room, I began to not to pray, but to call down the UFOs that my wife had been seeing. And 15 minutes later, a huge UAP appeared. And that was witnessed by my daughter, who was then 10 years old, and 3 adult witnesses. And then after that, for the next 4 years, began nonstop paranormal experiences. And so, and then, which eventually led to the formation of the Dr. Edgar Mitchell Free Foundation. And the the 4 co-founders of that organization was Apollo 14 astronaut Dr. Edgar Mitchell, who was also the founder of the Institute for Noetic Sciences, together with Harvard astrophysicist Dr. Rudy Shield, and Mary Rodwell from Australia, who has been researching UFO contact experiencers. And over a 5-year period, the 4 of us, together with about 15 other individuals, most of them were academic professors, we did the world's first and only academic research study of individuals that had UFO-related contact experiences. And over the first 9 months, we developed a methodology for these 3 surveys, and developing the survey questions, etc., administered it. And we wound up with more than 4,200 individuals from over 100 countries that responded to our surveys. And this was extensive surveys. We had 2 surveys of 600 questions. And then we had the 3rd survey was qualitative. They had to write out answers to 70 questions. And we wound up with more than 10,000 pages of written responses to these 70 questions. And then we spent basically a year and a half analyzing that data with our professors. And so we published a book 820 pages, very, very thick book. I don't know if you've had a chance to read it or not, but I am making available to all of your audience members 450 pages from that book, which is most of the analysis of our statistical data for free. All you need to do is send me an email to info@experiencer.org, info at Experiencer, EXPERIENCER.org. So you can learn from yourself, from our research study. Now, our research study data, no one has ever done before. There is absolutely no comprehensive statistical research of UFO contact experiences. Our work was the first and only research study in that area. And our research findings totally contradict what is circulating in ufology. And if you'd like, I could go over some of those research findings, just so your audience members know the four major ones.
Yes, please. Yeah, go ahead, because it's impressive research, as you said. Yes, please.
Yeah, the four major research findings are as follows. First of all, there were many other findings, but if someone were to say, Ray, just give me four, this is what it would be. First of all, we wanted to find out whether these experiences were positive, negative, or neutral, because the internet is circulating with so much misinformation and disinformation. And so we wanted to clarify that. So we asked that question of positive, negative, or neutral in more than 25 different questions, because depending on how you ask the question, you'll get a different response. So what we discovered was that initially, approximately 1/3 of the individuals stated that their experiences were frightening, that they were negative. But towards the end, when they were actually doing the surveys and answering the questions, it was only 4%. That's it, 4%. The reason was that in the beginning, when you see a being in front of you, you're going to be totally scared. Yes. You're going to be frightened. But then for the vast majority of these individuals, they've had numerous encounters over the years. And then the more encounters you have had, the less frightful it is. And then towards the end, they became very pleasant, very spiritual. These became teaching experiences, and I'll go over some of that in a couple of minutes. We also discovered in that area of questions, much of materialist ufology believes that these experiences are only abductions. Well, we asked that question, and what we found out was that only 1 out of every 3 experiences were abduction related. The other 2 were not abductions. Okay, people saw UFOs, they've had contact with the non-human intelligence, but no recollection of ever being abducted. Now, out of those that did have an abduction, what we discovered was that 70% of the 1/3 that had an abduction stated that they are not abductees, that they're actually contactees. Mm-hmm. Okay, so as I said earlier in the beginning, this was frightening, but then towards the end, they were being brought to other realities. They were giving spiritual teachings. They were brought to a perceived UFO craft, where they were allowed to roam the craft at will, or even shown how to operate the craft, given messages by this intelligence, et cetera, et cetera. So that was the first major finding. The second major finding was that these experiences resulted in a complete positive profile transformation of the individual. We asked roughly 70 questions, which discussed how were you beforehand with certain views, and then how are you now? So for example, we asked the question, are you much more loving to other individuals? The response was overwhelmingly yes. Are you much more ecologically friendly? The response was yes, much more. Are you much more spiritual? Yes. okay, et cetera, et cetera. We asked 60 questions and how these people changed. And then on the opposite end, we said, are material things important to you now? And the answer was the opposite. No, material things are not important. Money's not important. Having a new Mercedes-Benz every year, that's not important, okay? We asked, do you fear death? The question is no, decrease, okay? And so I could go on and on with these questions, but your audience members get the idea.
Yes.
What people go through this process is a transformation of your entire personality, the entire way of how you view the world, how you treat others. You become more loving, more compassionate, okay? And we use those questions, we borrowed it from a study that was done in 1992 from a professor out of the University of Connecticut, Dr. Kenneth Ring. He was one of the pioneers of near-death experience research. In 1992, he compared 85 people that had near-death experiences with 85 people that had abduction experiences. And what was his findings? Both of these groups changed exactly the same way, okay? You would think that near-death experiences would be the one that would be changing in that direction, not people that had abductions. But no, he found out that both groups changed exactly the same way. So that was one of the few statistical research studies on UFO contact experiences, but it only had 85 people. And the questions were very limited, okay? So what we did is we borrowed those questions and we gave it to 4,200 people from all around the world. And guess what? The same exact data, okay? So what this intelligence, UFO-related intelligence, which we still don't know what that is, and I'll go into that in a couple of minutes, okay? What they're doing is totally changing humanity. The people that have been contacted, okay? Totally transforming them to become better people. People that you would want your parents to be, your brothers and sisters, your spouse, your wife, your husband, your children, okay? So that's what really is happening. And that's not the BS that's circulating on the internet, okay? These are facts from 4,200 people. So that was number two. Number three, okay? Most of materialist ufology and most of what's on the internet, they believe that these experiences are primarily physical experiences. Now, in order for you to take our surveys, we had two criteria. First of all, you needed to physically see a UFO. Yes, there it is. There's a UFO, okay? Number two, you have had to have some type of contact with non-human intelligence. And that could be a physical contact where a being is right in front of you, or telepathic, download communication. So that's the criteria. Now, most people in ufology, as I said before, see it as straight a physicalist phenomenon. Well, what we discovered in our survey, that instead of a physicalist phenomenon, this was a paranormal phenomenon. Over 95% of the experiences were paranormal related. As I said, like in my case, I've called down 3 big, gigantic UFOs, very close, okay? And several smaller ones, okay? But that's the physical aspect of it. In terms of a being, I only saw one being, the one in my living room. But for 4 years, it was nonstop paranormal experiences. Seeing ghosts, seeing spirits, out-of-body experiences, being brought to other realities. Let me go over some of that data and let me inform you of that. 80%, 8 out of 10 people that took our surveys had out-of-body experiences. These are huge numbers. 37% had near-death experiences. 50% had seen a ghost or a spirit, okay? Out of those, 2/3 actually communicated. Hello, Aunt Sally, how are you? How is heaven? And so that very large numbers we're talking about. Orbs, 67% of the people saw colored orbs. We're not talking about a photo. We're talking about in real life, colored orbs, okay? 50% of the people were brought to a multi-dimensional reality. That's half of the people, huge numbers. That happened to me. Okay, medical healings, 50% had a miraculous medical healing. Again, these are huge numbers. And these are things that ufology doesn't talk about. Why? No one ever did the study before, okay? No one ever asked these people. But yet we have a website on Facebook, Consciousness and Contact Research Institute on Facebook. Just type in Consciousness and Contact. And there are like 8,000 people on that site. And tons of these people have had medical healings, out-of-body experiences, near-death experiences. They've seen ghosts and spirits, you name it, okay? And also, what we discovered, not only with the UFO contact experiences, that people that had initially a near-death experience, all of a sudden, they're popping out of their body. They're having out-of-body experiences. The people that had a near-death experience, all of a sudden, they began to see deceased people, okay? They begin to see UFOs. And it didn't start with seeing a UFO first. It started with a near-death experience. Same thing with people that began to do out-of-body travel, okay? Especially the major astral travelers, okay? All of a sudden, these people are seeing deceased people, dead people. They're seeing UFOs, you know, et cetera, et cetera. So that's the third major finding. And if you send an email to me, I will send you half of our book that has all of this data. And again, it's info@experiencer.org. Info@experiencer.org. Now, the fourth major finding, and let me summarize the first three. Number one, these experiences were overwhelmingly positive. Number two, these experiences were overwhelmingly transformative for the positive. People change their worldviews, their outlook, how they acted to others. Number three, these experiences were primarily paranormal and not physical. Number four, these experiences are multidimensional experiences involving a manipulation of space-time, okay? And that puts it, again, into the arena of what we're now calling the contact modalities. And that's why we started this new organization called Consciousness and Contact Research Institute. And we're going to be coming out with a new book on October 1st. It's going to have 4 volumes, okay? Each volume is going to be thick, all right? And the first 2 volumes are going to be theoretical in nature. They're going to be written by more than 30 PhD academics and a few medical doctors. We won't exclude them, okay? And all on the topic of consciousness and the contact modalities. Now, let me define what are the contact modalities. The contact modalities are all the different ways that humans are piercing the veil of our reality and having contact with non-human intelligence. And I said earlier, some of them, but for example, there is UFO contact. I prefer the term UAP because I don't believe that there are physical crafts that we're seeing and that we're experiencing with. Near-death experiences, out-of-body experiences, spirits and ghosts, remote viewing, hallucinogenic journeys, channeling, mystical meditation, et cetera, et cetera. What it is that all of these experiences that I mentioned, okay, the contact modalities, all of them involve a manipulation of space-time.
Yes.
Okay. So that means that all of these experiences are multidimensional experiences. When 50% of the UAP contact experiencers state that they've been brought to another reality, that's multidimensional. I don't know if people have seen, this is quite old, this movie. It's called Contact, with this very famous actress named Jodie Foster. Okay, she was brought to a multidimensional reality where she had a dialogue with her deceased father. Her father appeared very young and they were talking with each other, but he was like a hologram. Okay, so we had 50% of the people in our survey had the same or similar type of experiences. Okay, and so all of these experiences deal with your consciousness. Not your physical body, but your consciousness. People call it soul, whatever you might want to call it. But the true essence of who you are being transported to some other non-earthly realm. Okay, and I'll talk a little bit about that later on. And so what we're doing is we have 3 PhD physicists in our organization. Rudy Shields is a PhD physicist from Harvard University. Okay. Claude Swanson, a PhD physicist from Princeton. And we have another PhD physicist from Caltech who still teaches there, who's not public. We have Dr. Bob Davis, retired professor of neuroscience. We have Dr. Gary Schwartz, who was a tenured professor of psychology at Harvard University. He then went to Yale, and now he's at the University of Arizona. Dr. Dean Radin, who's the lead scientist at the Institute for Noetic Sciences. I could go on and on with these names, but I think you've seen them, and this is the cream of the crop. Okay. Now, what all of these individuals have in common is that all of them hypothesize that consciousness is primary. For the lay audience members that's not familiar with this term, that means that our reality is an illusion. Okay, that our reality is much more complex than what we think it is. And let me give a background for people to be able to understand that. What our PhD physicists have told me is that if you get a PhD today in theoretical physics, okay, you will become an adherent to a multiverse theory. That means if you're like Albert Einstein, Stephen Hawking, Rudy Shields, a member of our organization, all of these geniuses in theoretical physics, you will become to understand that we don't live in one dimension. We live in multiple dimensions, okay? So here you have the Albert Einsteins of the world, they know this, but the average person in the street, they have no idea that this is true. So what happens is that humans are interacting with this multiverse, okay? And our book is going to have various theories of how that operates, how it functions. One is a major article by the late Apollo 14 astronaut, my dear friend, Dr. Edgar Mitchell. And it involves what you see in my background, zeros and ones, information, okay? How humans are able to tap in information that is stored within our reality. And that enables, for example, precognition. You know how things that might happen in the future. You hear that all the time, okay? ESP, things of that sort. So it's scientists are now beginning to work out how this could possibly work. So our book is going to be going into near-death experiences. It's going to be going into out-of-body experiences. It's going to be going to discussing about UFOs. It's going to talk about hallucinogenic journeys. If you take ayahuasca, DMT, or psilocybin, mushrooms, that 50% of these people have encounters with non-human intelligence. It's the same thing, okay? Because your consciousness is transported outside of this 3D reality. So our book is going to be filled with 2 volumes, okay, of chapters to discuss all these topics. And then volumes 3 and 4 are going to be chapters that are written by experiencers, people that have had these experiences, but not just one type. This is like, give me an example. Our first chapter is from a medical doctor in the US. She's a pediatrician, very brilliant, smart woman. She's had 2 near-death experiences, not 1, but 2. Her second one is unbelievable because it supports the thesis of a virtual reality hypothesis, okay? She's had several out-of-body experiences. She's had 12 UFO sightings, half of them up close. 3 times these, a huge triangle-shaped UFO went over her and her husband that blocked out all the stars in the sky, okay? So she's had 12 of these types of experiences. She's had 3 Sasquatch experiences, okay? 2 of them up close, very up close, not far away at a distance, okay? And she wrote about that all in her chapter. And then she had astral traveling when she was young, from as soon as she can remember to the age of 11 years old, where she was taught lessons. Every night was a lesson, okay, via astral traveling. So how could you explain this medical doctor these experiences? And we have complex experiences with the contact modalities. So the first half, 2 volumes, are theoretical books that introduce the theory of how this is working, how the dynamics of this. And number 2 are the actual experiences. So you're able to see that these things are all interrelated, that they're not separate. Okay. I just got a little message here, but I'll continue.
Yeah, sorry, we got disconnected for a second. Please go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah. And so then these theories that we're putting forth in our organization, as I said before, all of the individuals believe that consciousness is primary. That means that our material reality is Maya. It's an illusion. It's much more complicated than that. And again, we're not talking woo-woo science here. We're talking about real science from physics and neuroscience, because right now, neuroscience itself will admit, and especially cognitive neuroscience, that they have no explanation for what is consciousness. Okay?
Indeed.
No explanation. Because consciousness, from a perspective of neuroscience, believes that consciousness begins and ends with the brain. Okay? That's because they don't have an explanation of it. Okay, they'll tell you that, but they haven't worked out the dynamics of how that works. However, when you are dead and you're seeing your body right below you, or you're having an out-of-body experience and you're seeing your body right below you, you know that consciousness has absolutely nothing to do with the brain because your body's down there and your consciousness is up there. Okay, so these are just things that's going to take time for humanity to learn, to go through this process.
Yes.
And the second main principle that we all share in our organization is that all of these experiences need to be researched and studied as one phenomenon instead of separate and distinct. For example, you go to a UFO conference, okay? Most of those individuals there are materialists, okay? Again, everything that I explained to you, they don't understand it. They don't care about it. Even the whole aspect of contact, you know, that's all BS, you know, contact experiences. All they care about is a physical craft, videos, and pictures, or a crash of a UFO, okay? Now, my perspective is, what has that approach given us over the last 80 years? My response is nothing. What have we learned about UFOs in 80 years? Nothing. That they exist. Disclosure, whoopee-doo, okay? However, our research study has gone into the details, the pores of the fundamentals of this phenomenon, okay? So over a 5-year period, all the data that we've collected has demonstrated that this is extremely complicated, okay? That we don't even know what questions to ask, okay? Let alone having answers, okay? But certainly these materialists that are so-called experts in UFOs, those people are totally clueless, okay? And I won't mention names, but your audience members can figure out who these people are. So if you go to a UFO conference, they'll say, what the hell does UFOs have to do with out-of-body experiences? What the hell does UFOs have to do with the paranormal? What the hell does UFOs have to do with being brought to a matrix reality? What the hell does UFOs have to do with near-death experiences? What the hell does UFOs have to do with seeing ghosts and spirits? You know, they're totally clueless, okay? Because it's the experiencers that are having these things. And all they care about is the new video, okay? The new picture, that's it. So unfortunately, what's gonna happen is the new paradigm is being developed. And our organization is pushing this new paradigm. And like any paradigm shift, you have to wait till the dinosaurs die out, okay? Once the dinosaurs die out, then the new, fresh, young blood gets developed and is willing to accept these new ideas, okay? So our views is called a post-materialist view of consciousness and reality. It's a totally radical way of seeing the world, and which very much align with the theories of Jacques Vallée. I don't know if you're familiar with some of the works of Jacques Vallée, but Jacques Vallée was talking about the same things that we've been talking about 40 years ago, okay? But Jacques Vallée has pushed aside ufology because from his perspective, it's all misinformation and disinformation and BS. Okay. And ufology has pushed Jacques Vallée away, okay, because they just don't understand it, okay. But yet, Jacques Vallée, I consider two of the pillars, the foundations of ufology. The other one is Dr. Allen Hynek, okay. Allen Hynek started off in the early 50s. Let me give you a background for your audience members that do not know who he is. This man was a professor, a full professor of astronomy at Northeastern University, which is one of the top 20 universities in the United States. You know, very, very famous, very, very prestigious, okay? It's in Illinois, which is north of Chicago. Now, Allen Hynek was hired to become the lead scientist for Project Blue Book. And his responsibility, this is starting in the early 50s, was to get all these reports that were sent to US military intelligence and to debunk them. To say, nah, UFOs don't exist. It's all fantasies, okay? So he did that for many years. But then over time, after seeing many of these reports, and most of the reports that were given to him were not the good cases. Those were all hidden. Those were put away, okay? But later on, he began to do this independently. And when he discovered that, yes, UFOs are very, very real, okay? This phenomenon is not fake. It's very real. But he still remained a materialist. You know, pictures, videos, materials, UFO crashes, that was his perspective until the very end of his life, okay? By the time he passed away, I believe it was 1977. I'm not quite sure of the exact date, but the last 2 years, he underwent a radical transformation. He went from being a materialist to someone who sees the post-materialist aspect of ufology, where the key to be able to understand it is consciousness. He says this is all multidimensional. These objects and these beings have the ability to manipulate space-time. Okay, and I believe that Dr. Jacques Vallée was developing his theories at about the same time. He hadn't gone public with them. We're talking about the mid-70s. And it was after that time period that Jacques Vallée began to publish his books. So I think he might have been inspired by the Allen Hynek towards the end of his life. So here you have the two individuals that were really the fathers of ufology, totally changed from materialist all the way to our position. But nobody talks about Allen Hynek, the old Allen Hynek, right before he dies. No. Okay? And nobody talks about Jacques Vallée, okay? Because they don't understand his theories. So our work is going to be following up on the hypotheses, the theories of Jacques Vallée, but extending it further, because Jacques Vallée basically took it within the field of ufology, okay? We're extending it further to all of the contact modalities, where Jacques Vallée said that all of the paranormal is all interrelated, but he never developed it. You know, he just stated it as a generality. What our organization is doing is getting into the details of it and how it works and breaking it down. Okay, so that's basically.
Yeah, amazing research, and so such a vast field. You have to kind of sometimes choose your battles, but as you said, it's much better to bring them together and study them under the same umbrella, because there are so many commonalities.
Yes.
You touch on the medical side. I have friends who told me that they've been abducted several times, and they had chips implanted under their skin. Did you have any instances where your survey respondents mentioned this type of incidents?
Yes, we asked that question. We asked a series of questions associated with that. But let me give you my take on that, okay? And again, it's a very complicated discussion, okay? And let me start off by saying that the whole field of abductions, the whole field of contact was established primarily from three individuals. The first one was Whitley Strieber, and he presented this as a negative, horrifying experience, okay, initially, okay, with his book Communion, okay. Later now, Whitley Strieber is Mr. Love and Light, Mr. Spirituality, Okay. He gives thanks to these beings, to this intelligence, for giving him these experiences because it brought him spirituality. He now talks to his wife, who's deceased, all the time. So it's a lengthy discussion to talk about how Whitley Strieber changed over time. But he's just an example of the experiencers in our surveys. Okay. These people in the beginning were quite negative, viewed their experiences as negative, but over time they became love and light, you know. Now, but now we're talking about when this whole arena was started, okay, and we're talking about the 1980s, okay. The other people that had major influences in this was Bud Hopkins and David Jacobs, okay. Both of these individuals stated publicly that they've never met anyone that's ever had a positive experience. To them, all contact was all abductions, all of it. Well, our survey determined that only 1/3 were abduction related. The other 2/3 were not. They also said that it was all negative. Well, our survey said the complete opposite, okay? So these are the people that were pushing this agenda, okay? So if you've had a perceived contact experience with a UFO-related non-human intelligence, okay, you were downloaded all of this information because you bought their books, you went to their seminars, you went to the UFO conferences, you know, you went to their workshops, and, you know, over the next 30 years, that's all you got, bullshit, okay? And so once you get bullshit and you analyze it and you put it in a pot, what do you get? You get bullshit, okay? So a lot of these people, oh, I've been abducted, oh, this or that, oh, I've had a chip, or this and that, okay? I've got friends that have told me that stuff, okay? Now, what we discovered was that many of these experiences are not experiences that people consciously recall. A lot of the information has been derived via hypnotic regressions, okay? Now, most of the people that have been doing hypnotic regressions in the UFO field, these are all people that started with that same mindset, okay? That this is all negative, they're abducting people, et cetera, et cetera. Most of these people over time that did these hypnotic regressions totally changed. Kathleen Martin started off UFO abductions. Now Kathy Martin is love and light. Mary Rodwell, okay, started off with abductions and trying to heal the trauma of these people. Now Mary Rodwell is love and light, okay? Dr. Leo Sprinkle, the same thing. Yvonne Smith in Los Angeles, again, you know, these were negative experiences, and all of a sudden, totally different perspective. Okay, these are the people that hypnotize these people. Okay, so if you've gone to a lot of these hypnotic regression people, you know, they lead you in a certain path, a certain direction. Okay, some more than others. David Jacobs, if you told them that you had positive experiences, or Bud Hopkins, they wouldn't see you. They would not see you because it didn't fit in their little box.
Yeah.
Okay, and so what I'm getting at, also another thing is that much of these experiences that people remember are piecemeal. You only remember little glimpses, a little here, a little there, a little there, a little there. The vast majority of these people, they don't consciously remember 5 or 10 minutes or 15 minutes or half an hour of this experience. What they remember is pieces, okay? Or they remember something a little bit more elongated via a hypnotic regression, okay? Now, hypnotic regressions are very problematic because you don't know who did the hypnotic regression, how it's done, whether leading questions were asked, et cetera, okay? So I'm just telling you what the facts are, you know, what we discovered with these individuals. So this whole aspect of chips, okay, implants, we don't really know whether that is what really happened or whether it is a fact they had a chip implant. Okay, because a lot of these people, once you talk to them and you get into the details, okay. For example, I'll talk in the beginning when I first started doing all of this. You would talk to an experiencer, let's say for 2 hours, right? An hour later, you think that these are all conscious memories, but then later on you find out part of it was from a lucid dream, part of it was via hypnotic regression, you know. Part of it was from a channeling. They went to a psychic person, they did a channeling, but they were telling me as if it was all one, like they were right there living it and experiencing it, okay? And that's when I realized that a lot of these people that go on these radio shows and radio interviews, they don't tell the interviewer that these were conscious explicit memory. These are all pieces put together, lucid dreams, channeling, hypnotic regressions. And then the parts that are memory, conscious memory, much of that is segmented, okay? Like people that have, for example, missing time, okay? They might remember certain aspects of it, but that time is completely gone, okay? So again, that's what makes this this phenomenon so complicated, because not only are you dealing with multidimensional things, not only are you dealing with the vast majority of these cases, including abduction cases, that it's where people's consciousness are taken, okay? Not necessarily the physical body. So they perceive their physical body, but it's essentially their consciousness that's being checked out, physically. Now, don't tell me how that works, but these are just the complexities of what's going on. But then when you mix in the whole garbage from the 1980s, from the 1990s that people have read, and then becomes part of their mindset, then it leads to total pollution of the experience. It becomes even more complex to try to find out what's going on. I hope I've explained myself.
Yes, that's very, very interesting. I want to ask you, Ray, if over the years, did you kind of build your own spiritual guide team, or how did you evolve spiritually after that March 2012 day?
Well, as I said before, I have only had one contact experience, and that was with that energy being. A lot of my other contact experiences have been like synchronicities. I wouldn't call them synchronicities. These are orchestrated type of things. Like, for example, after I had an out-of-body experience, while I was driving my car in the middle of a freeway, of a traffic jam, going to work in the morning, I was taken out of my body. And I was given all this download of what we're doing now. I was told what to do, and I was given the actual information. And then that same day in the afternoon, I got an email from Mary Rodwell. And it said, "Dear Ray, I'm sorry that I'm responding to an email that you had sent me 6 months ago, but it's just popped up on my computer today." Okay. So then we spoke until very late at night for me with Mary Rodwell. And then the very next day, I got a phone call. I didn't call him. He called me up. "Hello, is this Rey Hernandez?" "Yes." "Who's this?" "Dr. Rudy Shields. This is the professor of astrophysics from Harvard." He calls me at 9:30 in the morning. I had no idea who this man was. What happened was that Mary told him about my experiences, and all dealt with physics and downloads and consciousness. And Rudy's very much interested into that. So we then spoke for over 90 minutes, and he gave me a telephone number. He said, "Ray, write down this telephone number." So I wrote it down. He says, "This is the telephone number of my mentor." And so I said, "Who in the hell could be this man's mentor? He's a professor at Harvard, of astrophysics." I said, "Who's your mentor?" He goes, "Dr. Edgar Mitchell." Okay. So the very next day, I was at the home of Dr. Edgar Mitchell, because soon after I spoke with Rudy, I called Edgar Mitchell up. It was about 4 hours later, because I was scared to call Edgar Mitchell. He was a very famous man. So I called him up. He said, "Ray, what are you doing the next day?" I said, "Well, I'm working." He says, "Can you take the day off and come by my house? You only live 90 minutes away." So within 48 hours, 2 days, this intelligence that's interacting with me introduced me to Mary Rodwell, Rudy Shields, and Edgar Mitchell. So these are all pre-planned events, orchestrated. And that's how my experiences have been. Like how they gave me spirituality. They gave me spirituality through a series of near-death related experiences, okay, which were orchestrated. Okay, so it's not like I had a being appeared right in front of me with a monk's robe and told me things. No, it was, much more direct, I would say. Okay, now in terms of the book, for example, the first book, all the chapters for a book, I woke up on a Saturday morning, and I had all the chapters and who was going to write them. Okay, and I was like, "What the hell?" So I typed it up. I wrote it up on a computer. I sent it to Rudy Shields. I sent it to Mary Rodwell and a couple of our board members. Edgar by then had passed away, Edgar Mitchell. And they all said, "This is unbelievable. This is great. Go with it." So then I began to call all these people that they told me to write the chapters. And there was only one person that I didn't have, and that was who's going to write the conclusion. So I knew it had to be someone, very, very big, very, very famous, but I didn't get who it was. Like a few days later, I ran across the name of an email that I had communicated with this man named Brad Steiger. Brad Steiger has written over 120 books on the paranormal. Mm. He's like the godfather of paranormal research. Since the 1950s, he's been researching all these things that we've been talking about, including UFOs, okay? So I sent him the outline of the book, the research findings. He then got back to me like a week later. He says, Ray, this is unbelievable. It will be my great honor to do it. And what I didn't know that the conclusion he wrote in his deathbed. He was in hospice care when he wrote that, dying. And he finally finished it, and that's the conclusion for our book. Our book is titled Beyond UFOs. As I said before, I will send you half of our book, Beyond UFOs, over 450 pages, and information about our new book. Just send it to info@experiencer.org.
Thank you very much. I also listened to one of your statements where your wife at one point told you that you have to get prepared for what's coming, and especially the way of life we are going to go through, like the commune. Have you prepared since in any particular way?
No. I don't know what, I think it might have been COVID that she was talking about, but just a background. My wife, after she was praying for angels to come to heal our dog, which they did, okay? Because I consider that energy being modern angels, okay? That's an easy way for me to describe it, because they have the abilities, just like what we think of angels, the same exact abilities. And so my wife began to go outside and pray, and these huge UFOs would appear. She also had precognition. I mean, like, for example, we were going to go to our very first UFO conference, which is like 3 hours away from where we lived. I had purchased the tickets to the hotel, paid for the event, and it can be quite expensive for two people to go to another hotel and pay the fees and that sort of thing. So a week before the event, she goes, I'm not going to go. The car's going to crash. I said, what do you mean the car's going to? No, the engine's going to blow up. No, I'm not going to go. And I'm like, the next day, the same thing. And then she goes to the air conditioning, and the air conditioning is cold as hell. Cold, the air conditioning. No, you see, it's the air conditioning. The air conditioning is not going to work, and the engine's going to blow up. And I'm like, what are you talking about? So finally, like a few days before, I brought the car to the mechanic, and the mechanic said, Ray, thank God you didn't bring that car on that long trip, because the engine would have blown up. And he told me all the reasons why. She also detected a tumor on my back. Okay. Wow. And eventually, after she hounded me for weeks, I went to the doctor. He sent me to get a sonogram done. They detected a tumor on my back. They through a biopsy, they said it was non-cancerous. And then I went to a surgeon to take out the tumor. So how did my wife know all these things? Okay. So one time, and let's get back to your question now, we were in a totally different conversation. Out of the blue, it's like a channeled voice comes out of her. Okay. She says, you need to prepare, because in the future, humanity is going to go through very difficult times. There's going to be a thinning of population. Okay. And because we need to become much more spiritual. Okay. And you need to change, and humanity needs to change. And I'm like, what the hell was that? Then she stopped, right? So then I asked her, I said, who told you that? Because that's exactly what a lot of UFO contact experiencers say, okay? I said, who told you that? She said, no one told me that. So how do you know that? She said, I just know it. And I'm like, I'm asking her questions, and she didn't know what happened, of why she said that, right? So then she went back upstairs, right? And then I'm like, this is exactly what UFO contact experiencers say, okay? And who knows what she was talking about, The only thing I could think about is that the COVID, because there was a thinning of population. There was a major catastrophe all around the world, and we needed to be prepared, especially for the people that died. They need to learn what spirituality was before they died, if they didn't. And anyway, these are just things that in our survey we discovered. It's like, thousands of people that took our survey were having precognition skills, after their contact experiences. It's quite normal,
Interesting. So lately, there are a lot of UFO appearances, and even news channels like Fox News mention them at peak hours. Are these developments somehow make your life easier and your path smoother in promoting these concepts and bringing it forward?
Well, that's a complicated question, which deserves a complicated response. Okay. As someone who is a major experiencer, and as someone who has investigated experiencers all around the world, acknowledging that UFOs exist, it's like, a big deal. We already know that, But for humanity at large, let me just say that humanity is prepared for this, because let me start this response by saying this, okay? These are all orchestrated, pre-planned events, okay? By the universal mind. You might call it God, our universal creator, whatever term you have, okay? These are all pre-planned, orchestrated events, okay? And let me tell you this fact, okay? When was the first time that humanity, not just the United States or Canada, but humanity overall, became aware of visitors from other planets, of other beings, of multidimensional beings, and things of that sort? When did that become well known at an international level? I would say it was with Star Trek.
Yeah.
Because once that TV series came out, it was translated to almost every major language around the world. Every TV around the world had Star Trek. Okay. So then people began to understand this. So now when you mention UFOs, everybody knows what UFOs are. Everybody knows what aliens, what ETs, and all these things are, okay? Back in 1970, nobody knew about that, okay? So it's a total transformation when it relates to UFO contact, okay? Now, near-death experiences. When did that become popular worldwide? I would argue 1975, with the publication of Raymond Moody's book, Life After Life. Mm-hmm. He was the one that coined the term near-death experience. He literally wrote the first book about near-death experiences. 1975, that was 5 years after Star Trek. Okay, out-of-body experiences. When did that become known internationally? Okay, I would argue it was with the publication of Robert Monroe's books on out-of-body experiences. Yes. That was sold hundreds of thousands, if not millions of copies all around the world.
Journeys and the trilogy, yes, yeah.
Exactly, and multiple languages, just like Raymond Moody's book. That was translated to every language in humanity almost, okay? He sold millions and millions of copies. So now we had 3 out of the 4 major contact experiences. The other one is ghosts and spirits. But ghosts and spirits has been around since the beginning of mankind, okay? That's what I consider the 4 major contact modalities. Those 3 of them started within 5 years of each other. And again, for the young folks that are out there, this is before the internet. People don't realize that before the internet, you had to read a pamphlet or a book to become aware of these things. Now you put it on the internet and it's all over the world in minutes and seconds, okay? So this is before the internet. Now, the question to your audience members, is that a coincidence that 3 out of the 4 major contact modalities became known to humanity within 5 years?
No, I don't think so.
No, it's not. It was pre-planned, orchestrated. Okay. Now, that was a setup question to something that you asked. I forgot. I apologize. Yeah. Well, your question was again?
If the new UFO sightseeing.
Okay. Yes. Okay.
Will help you. Yeah.
Yeah. So my response now is that humanity is now pre-planned, is aware of the topic of UFOs. Okay. They've had surveys that have asked about whether you believe in UFOs. It was like half of the United States. Half of the world says, yes, UFOs exist, okay? So all it is that the federal government is confirming it. But if you would have listened to the internet, to YouTube, to reading books, to our research study, you'll know it's all over the world that people are having these experiences. So it's not really that the federal government is disclosing this for the first time. No, it's the first time that the federal government is accepting that, yes, there is something out there. They won't admit what it is, okay? And also they're going to be coming out of it as the threat, as a potential threat to the United States, okay? I know because I know a lot of the major players in this disclosure phenomenon. And that's how the U.S. government can get funding to continue this research and to open up about this. If it's a threat, then you'll get money. If it's not a threat, there's no money. Okay, so it's like a double-edged sword. Okay, it's being perceived, the language that's circulating, as a threat. Okay, and the government is disclosing this. Okay, so but to me, all it does is just to confirm what most of humanity already knows. Okay, but even then, they will not discuss what they think it is, and they will not discuss the experience of it, from the experiencer having contact. They will not discuss contact. That still is taboo. Okay, they'll discuss little videos, little pictures, all of that bullshit. Okay, but when it comes to what really is underneath the phenomenon, they will not discuss it, because that will reveal that this phenomenon is so complex. Okay, it's cancer. Solving cancer is going to be very simple compared to solving the UFO contact phenomenon.
Yes, and as you mentioned, staying a little bit on the medical side, most of the people who had this type of experiences got healed. So if I were a doctor, I will right away jump onto that opportunity to study more and see what's behind this miraculous healing, and understand the energy and how the interaction took place. But I assume that there is still lack of interest from the medical associations to look into this direction. Am I right?
That's correct. Let me correct you in saying that 50%, half of the people, stated that they had a miraculous medical healing either on themselves or a member of their family from UFO-related intelligence. And one of the chapters I'm going to give out for free is chapter 6 on medical healings. So if you do send me an email, I will send you chapter 6 together with all of us. You can learn about the medical healing aspect of it. But you are correct. But also, for example, the topic of near-death experiences. Okay, near-death experiences, there are literally hundreds of books that have been written by medical doctors and researchers, academic researchers and medical doctors on this topic. But yet the vast majority of the medical field will not touch that field. When I talk to these doctors privately, many doctors, they know about it. They've read about it. They heard about it. They've heard stories, but the field overall will not touch it. Okay. And similar to, like, for example, hallucinogenic studies. Here you have a professor, a tenured professor, an older man in his 60s, who's a professor of psychiatry. He was given the permission years ago to study hallucinogens, DMT, psilocybin, etc., to heal psychiatric patients and patients with depression. Okay, he's found that it's like a miracle drug. Okay, to deal with his field of psychiatry. Okay, nobody knows about it. Okay, he's published articles in journals, in medical journals. Doctors don't know about it. Psychiatrists don't know about it. So we're just in the infant stages, in the very beginning stages. Okay, to be able to get the information circulating to the public. And it's going to take some time, because just like, Galileo, his theories, it took a very, very long time for those theories to circulate. And just like quantum physics, quantum physics was not accepted by many of the physicists from Albert Einstein, never really accepted it until the day he died, So it's like with anything new in science, it takes a very long time to change. And that's the term called paradigm change. Paradigm was a term used in this 1962 book titled The Structure of Scientific Revolutions. which was a book that talked about how the field of science evolved over time. And it goes through shifts, worldviews. Like I said before, before Galileo and the Catholic Church, everything evolved around the earth. We were the center of the universe. And all of a sudden now, the sun is, we revolve around the sun. And then it was, okay, the sun was the center of the universe. And no, now it's much more complicated. So everything in science goes through stages. And he coined the term a paradigm change. So that's what we're doing with our new book. We're introducing a new paradigm of how to view our reality. And it's a paradigm involving consciousness, which is still not defined, okay? No one can tell you what is the definition of consciousness. The best thing I could say is how we humans as eternal spiritual beings interact with our reality, multidimensional reality.
Yes, and no matter how we define consciousness, I fully agree that we have to increase that level of consciousness and awareness in order to evolve as a species and communicate at a deeper level with these non-human entities and energies, and in the end, with the source. So, Rey, we are approaching the end of the interview. Thank you very much for your time. Any final words?
Final words is that I can give for free the members of your audience. I'm repeating it for like the fourth time, but this is extremely important for the members of your audience to get educated about this new way of thinking. And the best way to do it is by requesting documents and copies of information, and I'll give it to you for free. So just send me an email to info@experiencer.org. That's info@experiencer.org, and we'll put you on our mailing list. And we can send me emails or communicate back and forth with you. That's not a problem. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Rey. And I will put you in contact with some interesting guests I had on this channel, because they had multiple NDEs experiences and out-of-body experiences. And some of them are doctors, medical doctors. And that's
many. Our book has chapters from 3 medical doctors that are experiencers. And we also have 6 medical doctors that wrote chapters for the theoretical section. So this does not exclude, medical doctors, attorneys, professors. No, it's everybody. Everybody's affected by this.
Thank you very much for your work and for your time today. And for my viewers, thank you for watching it. Like it, share it. Support me on patreon.com/claudiumurgan. Get a free copy of my book when you visit my website. And until next time, love and gratitude.